Well, so in the spirit of doing things sometimes a new way, I am for the first time preaching from a laptop because it turns out I can't get the printer to work yet. So we're getting there. It works 1 out of 20 times for me so far, just not this morning. But I need it because I need to start with a reading from Andrea Gibson. So it's better in their words than mine. It's an excerpt from their poem called Clotheslines. You were carried on your father's shoulders, marching in Detroit's picket lines the same year you were learning to run from the word union. That's only half the reason I'm writing this from another city, remembering Detroit, the 12th story window of our hotel room, where you pointed to the square, where the crowds would gather their signs in 20 below weather, gray coats, gray hair, even on the young folks, but red hearts, engines built to last any factory design. You always said the word Michigan like the sweetest prayer. Driving through the back roads near Lansing, I knew you would murder anyone in the car who made fun of plastic deer ornaments. You taught me that good taste is respecting good people who keep the oven open in the winter to fight the overpriced cold. We both believe that good poems should come with that kind of heat, but yours can convince a room full of 500 anarchist queers to feed the plums of their hearts to an old man who wakes up at 6 a.m. every morning, drives to the public school to watch the janitor raise the American flag. Everything I know about class I learned from your lipstick color, red state. I still find it on my neck sometime, pooling near my collarbone, a lake big as the ocean without the tide to bring you back to the shore. You were never sure about me. You watched all my pickup lines drop things. But I don't play that game anymore. I spend all of my time learning to bake casseroles to bring to the neighbors in case somebody gets sick. So this isn't a sermon about food in which I invite you to consider becoming vegan. Many of our food sermons in UU spaces are that, and with all due respect, and I have much for vegans, this is a sermon in which I encourage the omnivores among us to sit on the floor with your friends and eat cold cuts. And if your ethical eating commitments don't allow this, please know that the important part of this is not cold cuts. I suggest eating almost anything at all with your friends or your family. And you don't even have to sit on the floor to do this right. Americans eat over half of their meals alone, including about a third of our dinners. And then there's all those lunches taken at desks during the workday. And the reasons are documentable, they're quantifiable, and they're reasonable. Longer commutes, longer hours, general statements of dread slip in there, like, I'll have to talk to somebody. And here in the DMV, we know that working hard makes that hard to do. We're not strangers to long hours, we're not strangers to long commutes, and we're definitely not strangers to general statements about the decline of civilization. So I would guess that the incidence of solo dining, well, it's higher here even than in other parts of the country. And most of us, even those of us here in the room, those of us who have been coming here for decades, who are well acquainted and deeply comfortable with sitting shoulder to shoulder on a Sunday morning, we're well acquainted with the loneliness that creeps in when we're surrounded in a major metropolitan area by literally millions of people, and yet we feel alone. Now, I want to take a step back because I recognize that it may feel outrageously audacious to preach about food and eating together when the world turns so fitfully. When we're just beginning our time together and you might be thinking, Reverend Shari, do you know that the boot of fascism lies upon our necks? Reverend Shari, do you know that there are literal Nazis? Do you know that life is hard for so many of us, and there is so much going on that is structural and scary? Why focus on this? Even the good stuff right now, the stuff of wonder and awe right now, it's not this, Reverend Shari, you might be thinking. There's a total solar eclipse in Iceland this week. We're talking about like a celestial event that is the stuff of historic prophecy and power. The moon will literally blot out the sun, and this is the kind of stuff that shakes civilizations. It's the kind of stuff that topples kingdoms. It's the kind of stuff that, quite frankly, we could really use right now, Reverend Shari. Did you think about any of this? I did. But most of us will eat today, and many of us will eat alone today. Many of us will sit with people we've been eating with for years or decades and not engage, may feel alone. It's okay to have a comfortable silence, but, well, how many of us are, quite frankly, wasting an opportunity to really be with the people around us or to be with people new to us? I say this not to shame you. I've eaten lots of meals scrolling on my phone. And I've eaten lots of meals where it's not this sort of mindless default, but where I've intentionally chosen to go out to a restaurant and eat by myself, to really enjoy myself. And I don't say that to brag, and I don't say that to shame those of you who enjoy eating alone. That intentionality is a real gift, and I want that for you some of the time. But loneliness, this disconnect, none of this is separate from the literal boot of fascism on our necks. None of this is separate from the power to topple kingdoms and end empires. Our ability to feel connected, to be with one another, to build new alliances and new relationships, and to deepen those that we already have is more important than ever. Now, turns out a laptop is very weird to preach from. So I was delighted to find this week, sitting in a doctor's office, a magazine, Washingtonian, that had the best cheap eats in the DMV. And I was delighted to find that a third to half of them were right here in Rockville. Deeply excited about my new home, deeply excited about many of the meals that I hope to have with all of you. But I have to admit that this choice, the many options of basically any sort of ethnic cuisine I could possibly want, it froze me on a Tuesday afternoon when I didn't know where I wanted to eat. I knew I wanted to go out to eat with someone, and I knew I wanted to eat something delicious, but suddenly an hour went by trying to take in all of the options here. It is a wonderful offering, something I am deeply excited about. But the truth is that all of the options, all of the greatness of food available to us so often distances us from the magic of being with the people around us. The truth is, in a time where people are being invited into unhealthy ways of making their bodies smaller, as fascism polices what people's bodies look like, in a time where we have so many options available to us, in a time where I just have to pick up my phone and suddenly I am inundated with recipe videos, you know, those disembodied videos that all have the same AI voice and sort of disembodied hands. Maybe your algorithms are different than mine, but this is my entire social media. Maybe it's not so much that we live in a food-obsessed culture as your new interim minister is food-obsessed. I also get ads for things like Blue Apron or HelloFresh or other boxes that don't pay for product placement in this sermon. All of these things promise the possibility of gourmet cooking every day. And all of this has ruined us. Something new and different every day is a sham that makes eating together more difficult. We're not better off for having so many choices. The trick is to learn to do the things we were going to do anyway, to keep it simple, and to use it as an opportunity to be with people. I was raised with the help of my grandmother, who is Chinese, and she took care of me and my sister and my younger cousins while all of our parents were at work. They worked long hours with long commutes, and, well, like me, my cousins are multiracial. I'm half Chinese and half white, mostly German and English and Scottish, and they're half Chinese and another mix of sort of white mutt. And all of the multitudes contained in this hybridity meant that really the only thing my cousins wanted to eat was mac and cheese. So they'd complain each and every afternoon to my grandmother, "Chinese food again?" And my Chinese grandmother would fix them with a somewhat steely stare that I'm still slightly terrified of, and respond, "Well, I'm Chinese, so do you mean food again?" Now, the truth is, my grandmother was a fantastic cook, is a fantastic cook, and she's a horrible example of keep your meals simple. I myself like to cook elaborate meals, right? I am the food-obsessed algorithm holder, but I'm part of the problem. The expectation of elaborate or gourmet or inventive or novel has driven us apart. So, keep it simple. Now, time and money places restrictions on us. Maybe you don't have a space to host others in your home. Maybe you don't have enough chairs at your dining room table or a dining room table. Maybe you have a dining room table and china, and it all feels too fancy for what you cook now. There are lots of reasons, lots of excuses we make to ourselves to help be a part of making the dinner party a dying art. But for this, we are hungry, not just for calories, but for the psychic, social, and spiritual sustenance that comes from living together. Cultures and religions have put eating together at the center of common practice for millennia, across lots of different ways of being together. About a decade ago, I spent a summer in a Buddhist monastery in China, and we'd spend hours in seated prayer, in meditation. We'd spend hours chanting. But the thing we did more often than anything else was eat together in a highly ritualized way. And each and every morning and each and every afternoon, we would silently process into the dining halls, not just the tourist monks like myself, but the actual monks who had dedicated their entire lives, not just a few months, to living together in Sangha, in community. We'd eat our meals entirely in silence, and yet it was a way of being together that mattered to this community. I had a similar experience visiting a Benedictine monastery closer to home. In silence, we entered. In silence, we served each other food. In silence, each mouthful was carefully considered in gratitude and a sense of our interdependence. A Seder meal with ritual elements and the collective telling of the Passover story. It teaches young people and guests about the history and heritage of the Jewish people. It's an anchoring reminder of shared identity. It's a call into liberation. In the Christian tradition, the night before Jesus was arrested, condemned, and executed as a criminal, he gathered for a meal with his friends. While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it. He gave it to his disciples, and he said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, passing it around the table and said, "Drink from it, all of you." These words continue in Christian services with the celebration of the Eucharist or communion. And well, there's a ton of variation in what people believe is happening during communion, a ton of variation in the theology of a Christian communion, but the ritual of eating remains important and impactful in people's spiritual lives. When Jesus says, "This is my body," and the church understands the church understands itself to be the body of Christ, there's a direct connection between the act of gathering around the table and what it means to be in worship. And so the power and impact of eating together, it is offered to all of us. And yet there are so many barriers to it. Now, for some with immense dietary restrictions, often driven by medical needs, for some with disordered eating, the anxiety of eating together, of finding that you may not be able to get the right food for you, well, the anxiety of eating together brings an immense amount of pain. And I want to recognize that, and recognize too that there are possibilities for all of us to set tables that invite each other in ways that we can imagine being together. For most of us, the concerns that keep us from eating together, from being together in deep and real ways, in silence or in real conversation, are less extreme, are pretty mundane. We don't have enough space, we don't have enough time, we don't cook well enough, we don't have friends we feel comfortable inviting into our homes. And here is the trick, the hardest part perhaps of eating together. It is the awkwardness and vulnerability of making new friends or letting your old friends see the ways that you and your lives have changed. But we are hungry for the intimacy and connection that all of this requires. Now, with our young people, I talked about fancy handshakes being a way I like to connect. And the truth is, each and every time I talk with our kids, it's a message truly for all ages, for all of us. I believe what our children need is also what the adults in this room need. At least I find that that's true for me when I attend worship that a colleague is leading. Many of us are envious of the ability of children to make friends easily. We think, and I heard last week from Julia, that making friends as an adult is so hard. But I invite, for those of you who are past middle school age, to put yourself back into being 12. And I want you to go into the first day of 7th grade. Did making friends feel easy to you that day? No, of course not. It turns out as an adult, it is ultimately the same moves of making friendship that help us deepen into relationship with people. It is as simple as asking, would you like to have lunch together? Can I sit with you? The things that we are already doing that are required of us in our day-to-day lives, how can we use these as invitations to open the door and invite people to grow closer to us? We are hungry collectively to offer and receive hospitality and generosity. Now, last week's welcome potluck for me was a great counterexample to this, or perhaps it was a great example of how we are so hungry, we really show up when it matters. But unlike last week, it need not be grand when we do this in the future. Eating together truly can be being on the floor. Eating together truly can be a plate of cold cuts. Eating together truly can be the leftover corn on the cob from last night's dinner. It really can be delivery beef with broccoli and you set out candles anyway. It really can be inviting people over to see what can be whipped up with what's already in the fridge. It really can be a delicious one-pot stew that's been cooking all day, but you don't have chairs for anyone, so everybody has to sit on the floor. It really can be any of these. Eating together, whether it's Passover or silently in monasteries, it becomes ritualized and familiar when we do it again and again and again. It reinforces something that we already value, and it opens us up to the possibility of something new. That we take in food and that we're able to continue living. This sort of basic biological mechanism. It is an everyday miracle. Einstein said you must believe that either nothing is a miracle or everything is, and I fall in the latter category. That any of our bodies work at all feels miraculous to me. That many of us eat without farming our own food. That many of us eat without knowing where our food comes from. Well, it's a gap, but nothing that we need to feel shame about. It's an opportunity to enter into the interdependence that our principles and values call us into. Even if we're not in the habit of saying grace before eating, we're invited into taking just a moment to remember how lucky we are. Something shifts within us when we practice something every day with a little bit more intentionality, a little bit more humility, and the opportunity to practice hospitality. Sharing food provides an entry point into other ways of being awkward and vulnerable with one another. Sharing food provides an entry point into freeing ourselves from the crushing boot of fascism. It seems simple, but our ability to create these connections when the world is cruel and change is necessary is critical. Now, not everyone can be out in the streets protesting. Not everyone has a job where your day will come, where you can find yourself an agent of sabotage and be the sand in the gears of empire. But everyone needs to eat. Immigrants like to eat. Black and brown people like to eat. Trans people like to eat. Your minister likes to eat. Poor folks like to eat. Your racist relatives like to eat. Sharing food with people who are impacted by oppression. Sharing food with people you wish to work with shoulder to shoulder. Sharing food with people you genuinely dislike but want to find some common thread of humanity with is part of what it means to build a new world. So on one final note, perhaps you've been sitting here thinking, well, thank goodness I'm married or I'm partnered or I have a kid and I've got a dining companion, so I don't have to worry about any of this. Great, I am glad for you. That's fantastic. And if you like that person, even better. And if you like spending time with that person over a meal, even better. What this means for you is that you have someone potentially to do the dishes when you invite over other people. Let those of us who are blessed bless the world. Take, eat, all of you. Amen, ashe, and blessed be.